Hello, good evening. I'm Arnell Gibbs, and welcome to Speaking of Everything. And with me this evening for the first time on the program is Mr. Arnell. How are you doing, sir?
Very well. Good evening, and thanks for having me, Arnell Gibbs.
Well, you are the president of the Chamber of Commerce for St. Martin, right?
Yes.
And this is the first time on the program, and maybe it's good if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and so forth.
Well, my name is Jean Arnell. I'm St. Martin. I grew up in French Quarter. I pursued studies in information technology in Europe. And after working there for a year, I returned to St. Martin in late 1999 to found a company called Computech. That is an IT services company. And today we are focused on moving our customers to the cloud. Secondly, as you mentioned, I am the president of the St. Martin Chamber of Commerce since 2014, and that is for a 5-year term.
All right. I hope I can have you back when it is to speak about the other part of the business, the IT part, if you don't mind. And tonight we're here to speak about the Chamber of Commerce. Now, you're on the northern side, we're on the southern side. It seems like we know very little about each other.
Well, first, I think it's important to understand that the chambers of commerces in the French system are mandated by law to carry out 3 main missions. First of all, as an official business registrar. Secondly, to foster entrepreneurship through training and other education ventures, and thirdly, to defend and represent the interests of the business community. And the way how that mission is carried out is through a tax that is levied on the business community to finance their representation.
Well, you know, business on St. Martin also pay annually as part of the Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. And I have to say here this evening that I commend you for being here, because I still can't get the president of the Chamber of Commerce from this side to come on the program like this. But anyway, let's speak about the Chamber of Commerce where you're president and what had happened, because, you know, over the last 30 years, there was a time when we saw Marigot as really an example of what a Caribbean city should be like. You look at Marigot today, it doesn't look like back in the 80s, 90s. What are the challenges for business on your side now?
Well, obviously the challenges on St. Martin are that of economic growth. What we've seen in a strong period of growth that happened between 1985 and 1995 as a result of tax credits for investments in the French overseas territories. We saw a large amount of hotel rooms being constructed and new car rental companies being opened. And we saw unprecedented growth, but also unprecedented demographic growth in immigration as well on St. Martin. And today, what we're living is the consequence of that unsustained growth. When your population is multiplied by 3 in the space of 30 years, you need to be able to sustain that new population. So St. Martin today is challenged to grow its economy as a result of population growth, as a result of the decline of its economy, and a number of international factors as well, national factors that have contributed to the decline of the economy over the past couple of years. For example, the introduction of the euro, the fact that we went from 4,500 hotel rooms in the early 2000s to less than 1,500 hotel rooms today. So we have a labor force that is about 18,000, and unfortunately, there's about 25 to 30% of that labor force that are registered unemployed. So an economy that is challenged, that is yearning for new investment.
Let's go back a little bit here, because what happened to the 3,000 hotel rooms?
Well, to explain what really happened, the French government voted a law in 1985-86 that aimed to incentivize hotel construction in the French West Indies. So those tax credits were for a period of 10 years, where investors would receive a tax credit for an investment in the French overseas territories so long they maintain it. When those tax credits expired 10 years later, the investor no longer had an incentive to maintain ownership in these properties. The second challenge was related to the fact that the rooms constructed were not necessarily aligned from a quality perspective with what the North American clientele seeked. And thirdly, there are obviously issues with operating cost of a hotel room and French St. Martin as opposed to the competitive landscape in which we are. So those three elements really contributed to the decline of the hotel industry. We believe at the Chamber that there is room to expand the economy, including building out new hotel rooms at French St. Martin, but also leveraging more the cruise passengers that arrive on the island already and expanding the yachting industries and others.
Now, you go back to the 70s and 80s and even early 90s, and you had a lot of people from French St. Martin working in the hotel industry on the Dutch side of the island. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier about unemployment. It's extremely high on your side, especially when it comes to young people. Mm-hmm. What are you doing as a Chamber of Commerce? What's government doing to try to reverse that? Well,
like I said, there are a great deal of initiatives that are carried out by the government in the Chamber of Commerce to stimulate entrepreneurship, to train the unqualified. But the reality is, if the economy is not creating jobs, you have a challenge there. What the economy really needs is new investment. New investment, private investment, foreign direct investment, and investment in public infrastructure. There's a recent IMF report that indicates for 1% of GDP invested in public infrastructure, you can increase your GDP on top of what it will grow to 1.8 to 2.4% depending on the size of your economy. So the reality is we need public infrastructure investment, we need foreign direct investment, we need private investment. And that is the only way, in our view, that the economy is going to be able to create new jobs at the rate that is required. This is, like I said to you, there are 5,000 registered unemployed on French St. Martin as a result of population growth and a decline in the tourism industry that represented more than 30% of our economy.
And these 5,000 you're mentioning, are these St. Martin born people?
Well, there are no statistics that define whether the unemployed are St. Martin born or not St. Martin born. I mean, you can obviously look at the place of birth, but those are the numbers registered at the employment agency on French St. Martin. Now, whether they are St. Martin born or not, I can't tell.
Now, when you speak about investment, the waterfront project, are you happy with?
Well, let me say this first of all. I am not a government official.
I understand that.
I am the president of the Business Representation Institution. Now, to my knowledge, and President Franz Gomes, when he was president at the time, had asked me to lead a group to look at the different variants of the waterfront concept. Today, there is no waterfront project on French St. Martin. There is a concept that have existed since 2006. And what is that concept? That concept is, how do we expand what already exists on the Marigot waterfront to build out hotels, to build out cruise, and to expand yachting. Those are the three components of the concept. Now, there are several variants of what could be a waterfront project. Today, there is no definite project, which means there is no scope.
So you're not aware of discussions with any potential investors, etc.?
Well, the government has issued an international tender for candidates who are interested in submitting an eventual proposal to develop the waterfront project as part of a 50-year concession. That period of candidacy was expanded for 2 more months, from the 26th of October to the 26th of December, and then they will decide where to move forward with it.
What are some of the numbers you're hearing in terms of this investment?
I have no indication of numbers. Like I said, there's no project, there's a concept.
And even with the concept, we have some concepts here too.
Right.
And they're projecting 200 million guilders to do it. Is there any kind of talk about how many euros approximately this will cost? I mean, from the Chamber, you haven't heard anything about
we have not been asked to submit an advice on this project, and I guess we will be at the point when there is an actual proposal. But the numbers can go from 100 million to 500 million. 10 years ago, when this project first emerged, it was around 50 million euros. Today, you're hearing about projects that are 500 million euros. So to state that there's actual scope to this project and a size of the budget of the project, I think at this point is totally irrelevant.
But you see it being necessary for this French development?
Like I said, there is a need for new investment on French St. Martin. I am not going to state here that the waterfront project based on this person's proposal or this person's proposal is good. French St. Martin does need new investment, like I said, in public infrastructure and private infrastructure as well.
I gather that it seems like political in a way.
Well, the government is the one has to make the decision, but in the end, it's not the government that is investing 50 million or 500 million euros. They are seeking private investment, and it all depends on how.
50-year concession, you said?
Yes. So it all depends how the potential investors are going to be able to derive a profit from the investment that they're going to make, and for the government to evaluate what is going to be the economic impact for the territory of such an investment. I think what is most important in a situation like this is there is an impact on jobs, there is an impact on investment in the territory.
What surprised me though is when I go to Maroc, when I go to businesses, I see a lot of people working, many of them doing jobs that, let's say, quote, St. Martiners can do. I know the whole situation on the French side, you're part of Europe, so any European French have the same rights to work here. Is that creating any problems in the job market?
We are in a very complex operating environment. Like you said, French St. Martin has a different European status than Dutch St. Martin, which provides for a labor continuity, not just for French Europeans, but for any European citizen. The second is that the labor laws that are applied on French St. Martin are French labor laws. So you're going to find a labor force that is a mix of people that are from Europe, from the French West Indies, from continental France, and from St. Martin. The fact is, over the past 30 years, if you look at the demographics in the labor force, it has significantly changed. That is a fact.
What about cooperation in terms of business, chamber to chamber, St. Martin, Dutch, French, etc.?
Well, regional economic integration, in our view, is very important. It's important for businesses on St. Martin, French and Dutch, to have access to bigger markets. And those markets, may they be Anguilla, St. Kitts, Antigua, it is important that our businesses understand the reality of those jurisdictions, what is required to actually do business there. So we've formulated an export agenda at the Chamber of Commerce, where we assist businesses not just with their knowledge of those markets, but to actually enter in those markets. We've developed a very good relationship with the Chamber of Commerce on Dutch St. Martin, as well as the Chamber of Commerce in St. Kitts. On this Friday, we're having an event here with the Chamber of Commerce from Antigua and the Chamber of Commerce of Anguilla. So in terms of cooperation, it is more than necessary that we provide some kind of means from a legislative perspective so that there is smooth business continuity between the two sides of this island. I mean, we've had free movement de facto on this island since 1648, but it's important that we make it simpler for businesses to do business on either side of the island. And if this needs to be put into legislation, our parliamentarians and territorial councillors on either side need to work on it. And if it needs to be put into policy, our executive councils need to work on those.
I wish you luck. And I mean that really, but I don't see that happening. I'll tell you why. I've been around for a long time, and I've heard a lot of people speak. You're a businessman, I'm a businessman. I'll tell you one thing. The politicians don't get it. I had MP Daniel Gibbs here many times preaching about cooperation. We need to cooperate. We are related in many ways, both in family, both sides of this island. This is one. However, when it comes to cooperation, it becomes a big, big problem to get the politicians to do it. I spoke with a businessman the other day who's also a politician on the French side, and he told me, he said, look, it's more difficult to conduct business on the side where you're president of the Chamber of Commerce. Have you heard that from others before?
Well, you know what? There are three more behavioral issues that we've identified over the past 30 years, which have affected the St. Martin business. And this is very important. We looked at the economy of St. Martin over the past 30 years, and we looked at that strong period of growth from 85 to 95, and what has happened from 95 until 2015. And there are three issues that affect the St. Martin. First, there was a strong and brutal transition where a lot of the documents and the criteria on St. Martin became French. It was much easier to do business. I mean, I grew up in French Quarter in the 80s. Prices in the shops in French Quarter were in guilders. So there was that abrupt change of everything becoming more French in the mid-80s. Secondly, a great proportion of St. Martiners went into public service. People that came from families that were shopkeepers and business owners. There's about 30% of the workforce on St. Martin that work in the public sector. The third aspect is the introduction of a French social welfare system. And this needs to be understood. That social welfare system, for the most part, is not financed by the local government, it's financed by the national government. So when people become addicted to social welfare, it's quite challenging. It takes away some aspect of your soul, these three items that I mentioned. So St. Martin has profoundly changed over the past 30 years. And the structure of our society, of our economy has changed. And like I said, we need to qualify the unqualified, prepare St. Martiners for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And the way to do this is through new investment, both in public infrastructure and in private infrastructure. If there's no new major projects that are creating jobs, then we remain in a standstill situation. So the economy is really yawning and begging for new investment.
You know, attracting investors from outside is becoming more and more difficult. Investors want to see a good return on their investment. And at the same time, they want a stable government. We've had issues on this side where we've had 6 governments in 6 years. You don't have that problem on the French side.
Let me say this. There are 4 items that make St. Martin and St. Martin a very good place of investment. The first is that we have an island that is accessible, whether it's by air, by sea, or by the internet. We have very good accessibility from just about anywhere. Secondly, we have a young population and a labor force that could be trained. So it really requires some kind of strategic planning to understand what kind of sectors, what sectors we're going to develop to train that workforce. The third is we do have regulatory and political stability. We're not in a country where there's coups and election every week. Of course, that we've suffered from some political instability on the Dutch side and from lack of development on the French side. But overall, we have good political stability and regulatory stability on the island. And fourth of all, we have good public infrastructure and an overall good school system on this island. So if you look at the other geographies where with which we are competing for new investment, whether it's the St. Kitts or Aruba and Anguilla and all of the other territories that are near us, we are in a good position. Today, we need to work on strategic planning and we need to work on incentives to make an investment, like you said, feasible on this island. And foreign direct investment, what it does, it shows confidence in your country over the long term. That is why foreign direct investment is important. There may be people that, Hank Paulson, which is the former Treasury Secretary in the U.S., wrote a very good paper on this, where a lot of U.S. Residents and businesses were complaining about Chinese investment in the U.S. And he wrote a detailed paper explaining how it shows confidence in the United States that people that are in Asia, where there's 25% of the middle class today, prefer to invest in the United States economy than in their own country. So the need for foreign direct investment is very important. But that comes also from government, at least on our side, clearly outlining what is our medium-term macroeconomic development plan and what sectoral policies we're going to develop.
What incentives you see will be necessary to attract foreign investors?
Fiscal, first of all. In the local government at Prince and Martin does have the authority to say, hey, if we want to raise money to build out public infrastructure, the investment in those public infrastructure may be tax exempt or maybe at a reduced rate in terms of the interest derived. Secondly, the urban zoning regulation. One of the biggest issues we have with attracting hotel investors, particularly on Prince and Martin, is the zoning regulation regarding how to maximize the usage of property. In fact, the local population is complaining about the fact that they cannot maximize the land that their grandfathers, etc., left them because the fact that the zoning regulation is not adequate. What St. Martin's wanted is to maximize the value of their land, and that is what we need to offer to investors, whether they are local or foreign.
The euro. What has the euro done to Prince and Martin? Good or bad?
The reality, like I was saying, is that we're in a complex operating environment. From a regulatory perspective, we're subject to European laws, French norms, and we have a local government that also legislates. Secondly, our monetary system is not the monetary system of our real economic space. Our real economic space is a dollar space. I mean, you read every report, 65% of our tourists come from North America, tourism being our most vibrant economic sector. So the challenge there is really how do we operate in a sustained way? I mean, today everyone is saying it's good. The euro and the dollar are basically have panned themselves out. However, the introduction of the euro have significantly impacted the economy of Prince and Martin with what I mentioned regarding where tourists come from. So I think there is a strong need to study the economic impact of the current EU status that Prince and Martin has, and not just the euro. The European norms, for example, in construction, increase the cost of construction on Prince and Martin by 25% of any major property or hotel.
So it's not competitive.
So we need to look at this from an economic perspective. There's obviously certain securities and assurances that are provided by those norms, but we need to look at our regulatory environment from a competitiveness perspective. So I do not have an opinion today whether Prince and Martin should be dollarized, whether we should integrate the EC dollar, whether I don't have an informed opinion on the matter because it was never studied. But our regulatory environment in terms of the complexity of Europe, national, local, the euro as a currency must be studied in terms of our volume of trade with Europe and whether that volume of trade is a result of our regulatory environment or it's simply a result of economic trade. That is the perspective I believe it should be taken from.
So as president of the Chamber of Commerce, how you feel? Do you remember the first day you went in on the job? And today, how you feel between then and now? Are you optimistic?
Well, I feel encouraged. I feel encouraged because although we're operating in an economic environment that is stagnating, I'm encouraged because the world is moving in a direction where we're seeing opportunities being created for those that build the right skill set. And St. Martin being connected to the rest of the world, whether it's by air, sea, or the internet, it provides an opportunity for St. Martiners to be much more than just consumers, but also be producers.
Well, Arnell, I'm out of time. I want to invite you back on my Oral Gibbs Live, the live show where we get a chance to speak for an entire hour. I hope you'll accept the invitation.
Sure.
It'll be really good. And it was a pleasure having you here, and we'll have you back soon.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
And that's it for now. See you next time right here on Speaking of Everything. Till then, good night. Take care. Bye.